Welcome to Her Wealth Unscripted. We're your hosts, Susan Jones
and Sara Gelsheimer. We believe financial decisions are most powerful when they're made with intention and grounded in what matters most to you.
This is a space for real conversations about money, life, and the moments that change everything.
Because it's more than numbers, it's the life they make possible. I'm really excited today to talk about the confidence gap between men and women when it comes to investing. So I feel like there's been a lot of focus on different media outlets on the knowledge gap, so the gap in knowledge between males and females. But I feel like in our experience and even in some research, it's often not been about ability at all. It's really more about confidence. Have you found that to be the case, Susan?
Yes, I mean, that is so true. I think, Sara, we often see clients that we work with that we know are really intelligent, capable women, but they just, when it comes to investing and talking about finance, they just really minimize themselves and a lot of times what they're already doing. So a lot of times we see women that really are the ones that are paying the bills and doing the budgeting for the family. And we know they know, kind of what they're doing. But then when it comes time to, talk about it, oftentimes, especially, in a group setting, they feel just really not confident in their knowledge and even sometimes are afraid to ask questions.
Yeah, that is so true. And I want to, we talked earlier or in the intro, mentioned that it's been anecdotally, but also that research has shown that it's a lot more to do with confidence than even just knowledge. So I wanted to share some of the research that was done. It's been a few years ago, but it was out of the Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center. Say that 10 times. But basically, they gave a financial literacy test to men and women. And there were two versions of the test. So one included I don't know as an option, and one did not. And the results were crazy. So women were more than twice as likely than men to choose I don't know when it was available. But when that option was removed, so the women that didn't have that option on the test, their correct answers jumped significantly. So there were multiple questions in there, but one of them, for example, just to give some of the research behind it. So one was on interest rates. And so the group of people that had I don't know as an answer, in that group, 56% of women answered correctly. When that answer was removed, 85% answered that question correctly. So that's just one example within that literacy test where it really showed it was less about the actual knowledge as it was in women's feeling like they actually knew it. So often we really just need to give ourselves more credit.
Yeah. And I think, Sara, that isn't a phenomenon that is only, that we see in investing. I think one of the things that, particularly, if you've ever been a hiring manager or reviewed resumes, you realize and you've seen that oftentimes women, we hold ourselves to a much higher standard in terms of even the jobs we apply for. And so there's been some debate about, different studies, but I think, it's kind of understood that women oftentimes think they have to have all the qualities or all the, qualifications that a job requires in order to even apply for that job. Whereas men oftentimes feel much more confident doing it if they only have, 60 or 70% or even less of the requirements for that job. And so I think, again, it's something that, although we're talking about investing today, it's not something that's solely that we see in that realm. But I think it's a little bit more expanded as well. But I think what's really interesting is that, there's kind of this plot twist that even though women don't feel as confident about investing, that they're actually better investors. And so there's multiple studies. Fidelity is one. UC Berkeley has one. But again, there's many studies that show that women actually outperform men when they're investing by somewhere between like 0.4% all the way up to like 1.8% every year. And so while that might not seem like a huge difference, what we know is that due to the power of compounding, that can really impact returns over a long period of time. And so, it's one of those things like, well, why could that be the case? And, again, I think just what we see oftentimes working with women is that women don't do some of the other things that sometimes we see a little bit more common with men. And so a lot of times, they're not doing that, kind of chasing the next big fad. They don't feel compelled to trade as much, which again, we just know from research that staying in the market, even when there's volatility, usually leads to a better outcome, because it's so important to be in the market on some of those key dates when the market goes up. And then, again, they just overall, I think what I've seen is that they're often much more sort of collaborative, and they think through their investments, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're more conservative investors, but oftentimes just, what I've seen is that they're oftentimes more thoughtful investors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And while we're talking about confidence, obviously we're talking about how important it is to gain that confidence, but sometimes an overconfidence is detrimental, especially when it comes to investing. So that's just kind of an interesting piece there. But, I do feel like in terms of stories or experiences, I've had many clients. I'll share an example. So we'll call her Jane. So I worked with Jane and her husband. And her husband, like many situations, it's pretty common where the husband was taking over all of the financial life. And Jane did come to meetings, which was great, but it was very clear he handled it all, and she really didn't have a whole lot of engagement in that. Well, fast forward, Jane and her husband unfortunately got divorced. And not surprisingly, Jane was completely overwhelmed. I mean, she didn't know where to begin. She told me, she was like, I wasn't great at math in school. I never dealt with this. They had been married for over 30 years. I mean, this is a real life change, really upheaval in her life. And she was, again, completely overwhelmed. But I told her, I was like, look, you can do more than you think you can. I know he's been handling it for a really long time, but we worked together, piece by piece. We literally went through her bills and we said, okay, how are you paying these? Like, are these on auto pay? Let's get more of these on auto pay. We went through her budget. It was the first time she had actually looked at where her dollars were going each month. And it was, obviously heartbreaking to see her so worried and upset in the beginning. But I watched her over that following, year or so, just her confidence soared. And she came and she's like, I can do this. I can't believe I've been so worried about it for so long. And so, that's a prime example of sometimes if you don't try it, it seems really big and scary, but it doesn't have to be. We often just need to give ourselves a little more credit, because most of the time they can do it just fine.
Yeah. I mean, kudos to you, and what a great feeling I'm sure that was, working with that client. And I think what's interesting, I have a client, oftentimes we think about confidence as something that someone's lacking confidence that they never had to begin with. But I one time had a client who I started working with right after she had gotten divorced, and she, her former husband, her ex-husband, was a very successful businessman and really well known. And although she was never excluded from financial conversations, they had a team of investment advisors who, again, treated her with respect, but they never really treated her as if she was one of the main characters. So she was there, but she wasn't necessarily talked to. Definitely things weren't explained to her. And when we first started working together, she was incredibly overwhelmed. I mean, to the point that she wouldn't open up her account statements because she claimed, that she really couldn't read them. She hired someone to help her with bill pays and, to pay the bills and to review her budget more closely, and just to really help with the logistics. I came to find out after we started working together and she started building more confidence and we started doing more together, that she actually had a PhD in a finance related topic. And so she had done really well in school, had even worked for a couple of years before she got married after she graduated. But because that had been so long ago, I mean, she, forgot, I think, just how capable she was. And so as she started to get more confidence and started to get, kind of build it back up, it became clear that she wanted to go back to work. And she actually became a financial advisor herself. And so, you know, to me, that just really was like the embodiment of everything we're talking about today, that it had nothing to do with her capability. And in fact, she had a lot of evidence that she was very capable just based on her academic achievements and, you know, the work experience that she had before she stayed home to, you know, raise her children. And so once it started building again, then, you know, it became very clear that not only could she do it for herself, but she could do it for other people as well.
That is an amazing story. I love that. It's just like riding a bike, right? She just had to
Right.
get back on and everything came
Yeah.
back to her. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, probably, you know, just the power of negative self talk that, you know, she obviously been doing that for many years and
Yeah.
just forgot.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like there are some common patterns that we see with women, whether it's in the financial industry or just in life in general. I mean, how many times have you heard a woman say, this is probably a stupid question, but dot, 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 or I know I should know this,
Yes.
but, or apologizing before asking. I mean, how often we just say the words, I'm sorry. It's pretty crazy when you start paying attention to it. Like I I preach on this all the time. I mean, I'm super aware of it. And even I find myself saying things like, oh gosh, this is probably not the smartest question ever, but XYZ. And I'm like, oh my gosh, even I'm falling prey to it. And I am very aware of it. So I think we as women just tend to have that more negative self talk or be more self conscious, especially in areas where we don't feel super confident. We want to make sure that we've got that caveat of like, I know this might be a stupid question, but we've got to get better about doing that. So yeah, and I mean the cost of not moving forward by staying stuck. I mean, it's huge. It's huge. So you know, you alluded to it earlier, the power of compounding. I mean, by staying stuck and not moving forward because you are fearful and feel like you've got that lack of confidence. I mean, by not getting into the market, for example, you're not letting that compounding work for you. And the later you get in, that the less powerful that is. I mean, there's, you know, tax strategies to take advantage of, giving strategies. You can be giving to charity or your children or grandchildren and children in a meaningful way. You know, just things that can lead to freedom and better life by actually, you know, taking that step and getting into it, even if it is a bit scary.
Yeah, no, that's such a great point. And I think, you know, another thing we see, you know, the self-talk is so important, but also to get away from that kind of all or nothing thinking. And again, I think this goes back to the job requirements and kind of that thinking that, hey, if I can't do this perfectly, maybe I shouldn't do it at all. And I think so, you know, a lot of times we meet women that because they don't understand, you know, the most complex financial strategies, that they again don't open statements or they don't do, you know, some of the things that would help build their confidence. And so I think, you know, in addition to you know, not doing that self-talk, but really to try to encourage yourself to start working toward being more confident. And a lot of times really the things that you can do to get there can be, you know, pretty safe in terms of what it's going to require. So, you know, again, kind of looking at what you have. And so whether that's, you know, opening your 401k account and making sure that you don't have too much cash in there and to see how you're invested and how long ago it was that you know, made those choices. That can be a great way to get started. And even just look at what your contribution rate is, you know, make sure that you're at least getting that match, but that you've thought through that and it hasn't just been something that you kind of put on autopilot and done the same as last year without thinking it through. Even if that means you have to reach out for help. Also, you know, choosing to engage somehow. So whether it's reading a financial book, listening to a podcast like ours, we hope you choose ours, but even just for, you know, pick one episode a week or, you know, even 10 minutes a day, just whatever is going to kind of work into your schedule in a way that feels comfortable. And then write down questions. And so whether that's one question, whether that's a whole list of questions, but really, you know, instead of kind of thinking of a question and then putting it away and thinking, well, I don't know who to ask, start thinking about that. And, you know, if there are questions that you can answer for yourself on Google, you have to be a little careful with that. But, you know, even that can help get some of those, you know, those terms and jargon, as you had mentioned before, Sara, make them a little bit less scary. But certainly if you have a lot of questions, again, a great time to reach out to a financial advisor.
Yeah, I mean, I would often have clients show up to meetings and they'd pull out their little notebook and they'd have all their questions there, and nothing made me happier. I was like, oh, this is the best. Being able to walk them through each one. And I'm, a huge proponent of education. We are here at Sorelle, and making sure that people on the other side of the table understand what we're talking about, what the game plan is. After all, it is your life. So being able to write down those questions and make sure you've got someone trustworthy to help answer those. And if you don't understand the first explanation, say, can you explain that to me in a different way? And hopefully that, second or third time's a charm. But so important to ask the questions and write them down when you think of them. And even, you mentioned self-talk earlier. Just watching your self-talk, that's a huge way to start shifting into that realm of confidence. So maybe it's, you can't say something, that's completely untrue, like I am the best financial, minded person ever. You have to say something, go from I'm bad with money to something like I'm learning, or I'm building my confidence. So start being very cognizant of what you're telling yourself, because what you tell yourself, you want to be, truthful in that. So if you're telling yourself you're bad at money, you're like, well, I better make sure I'm bad at money because I'm telling myself that. Right. So, even if it's not reading, finance books for 5 hours a day, just watching what you say to yourself can make a huge difference in your confidence level.
Yeah, that is true. How often, we're quick to give others grace, but then we're so hard on ourselves. And
right. So, yes. Yeah. The coach we both worked with in the past, has said before, like, would you say that to your best friend? I'm like, well, of course not. Well, then why would you say it to yourself? I'm like, okay, good point. So, and I think, if we kind of wrap up here, there's the whole kind of chicken and the egg, confidence versus action, right? A lot of people want to wait to take action until they feel confident, until they feel like they know everything, and then they can take that step. But, what research shows and just what we have seen, you have to take the action first. And then that leads to confidence, which leads to more action, which leads to more confidence. But it's got to start with action. So, do you have any parting words, Susan, on an action that someone can take this week, maybe to make that first step? I know you listed a few of those earlier, but if you've got any others you want to share.
Yeah, I would say, look at what you have. So whether that's open a statement, whether that's do, something really small, but I think a lot of times that is where the fear starts, is thinking, I don't even know what I have. And so that's something that I think, can be, whether it's, you open statements, whether you look at your tax return, whether you just somehow start to get a sense of what you have, and what you've looked at recently and what maybe needs a little bit more attention. Again, you don't have to do all the steps, but just kind of start working toward that, I think, can be so powerful.
Yeah. Commit to something today. Yeah. One small brave step can lead to, huge results. And certainly if you feel behind or felt behind, you're not, you're very capable and you're probably already closer than you think. So hopefully this episode has been helpful. Please share it with a friend. Reach out to us with any questions. We love answering questions. So please feel free to pass those along. Just really keep the conversation going. These are such important conversations to have. I think women in general don't have money conversations enough. So keep that conversation going. This is more than the numbers. It's the life they make possible. Thanks for listening.